that pain is a way to take care of ourselves. And I know it doesn't sound like that, it doesn't feel like that, but that's exactly its purpose. And let me tell you, life gave me a big, big, fat dose of pain. You don't have to be helpless to the pain.
So I'm really excited to be having this conversation in particular today. It's really resonant for me. We're talking a lot about pain today, just like a light topic, right? Pain. The reason why we're talking about pain, this is what your blog article is about, is thinking about pain as the portal. And I think you're talking about pain as both physical sensation. You've dealt with a lot of pain or chronic pain over the course of your life. But other types of pain too. That could be emotional pain. That could be spiritual pain. There's so many different ways that pain shows up. Uh, when I was reading your blog post, the thing that really stuck out to me and something that I'm constantly living in myself is how we approach that pain is often making the pain worse in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic, and you're right. It's heavy. It doesn't need to be. Pain is a normal human experience. It's just like breathing. We experience pain, and there's a purpose to pain. But what we've been shown is that pain is something that is bad. And a lot of times when we experience pain, typically what we'll do is we'll say, well, what's wrong with me? So it's indicating that there's something wrong. And for some reason, people tend to feel helpless or powerless to pain. And I think part of it has to do with that we're not really equipped. We're not taught how to manage pain. And typically what we do, or commonly what we'll do, is one of several things. One is we're trying to figure out how to get through it as fast as possible. It's like we're often telling ourselves, oh my God, this is awful. How do I get through this? That's one option. A lot of times we ignore our pain. I know for myself, being a crazy extreme athlete, I trained myself to push through pain, like almost ignore it, like disconnect, like literally disconnect and disassociate from the sensations in my body so that I could push through pain. And so we've been taught to do that. We've taught, to ignore it or make it bad, make it wrong. And in reality, pain is not a bad thing. And what I want to help listeners with is, first of all, it's a common human experience. It doesn't have to render you helpless. Like, you don't have to be helpless to the pain, but to really understand that there's a different perspective. And let me tell you, life gave me a big, big, fat dose of pain. And every kind of pain that you could imagine. I had experienced excruciating, torturous back pain for decades, and had also experienced a lot of emotional pain because of my childhood trauma and suffering from anxiety and depression, and also just a lot of angst around my spirituality and purpose and meaning. And so, the universe, life, whatever you want to call it, gave me a big dose of this. And it wasn't because I got dealt a bad hand or somehow I was being punished by life. It was for me because it there was a lesson. There was something that I needed to learn from this. And once I was able to appreciate that, I stopped doing the things that I typically did. And what I typically did was I ignored it. I dissociated from it. I made it wrong, like somehow I was weak or there was something wrong with me or as defective. And so I would push it away. I would ignore it. I would do what I could to kind of grin and bear it and just grit my teeth and get through it. And when I realized that those things that I was doing was actually keeping me in the pain, it was actually doing the very thing that I didn't want it to do. When I recognized that, one, and two, when I got to the point that fighting this pain and these multiple levels of pain that I experienced, when I got to the point of just pure exhaustion, I needed to do something differently. And so what I did do was I turned toward the pain and I sat in the pain and I listened to the pain instead of fighting it, instead of trying to get away from it, instead of trying to push it down instead of trying to ignore it. What I recognized was that there was actually a wisdom to it. Like it told me, it showed me, it gave me information that I needed to hear, that I needed to focus on in order for me to take care of myself. So it changed my relationship with pain. And the way that it changed my relationship with pain to this day is when I experience pain, whether it's emotional, whether it's spiritual, whether it's relationship based, whether it's physical, instead of saying to myself, how do I get through this? Or I'm just going to ignore this. What I've done instead is I've said, what is it here to show me? So rather than resist the pain, I walk through this doorway of pain. And this is why I've called this blog, pain is a portal, because it is a portal. It takes us somewhere. And so instead of pushing it away, we walk through this doorway and sit with what it has to show us. And that's how it's really changed my relationship with pain.
I think something that you're talking about is the way that some of us are exposed to pain based on the lives that we've lived, or we have, a higher propensity or like a higher, just exposure to pain. I think in some ways that's the experience of firsts, oftentimes, where they are in positions where they need to work really hard, or they are exposed to maybe more trauma or maybe more systemic oppression. There's also a push to ignore that pain, or like a need to ignore that pain, because if you allow yourself to be debilitated by that pain, then you might not be able to work. You might not be able to provide or protect for your family. Such a common response is, I just need to push through this story. I need to get away from it. I need to resist it. And what you're saying is that that's not really the solution to it.
No, it's not, because I think about my family and endurance and the things that they endured in their experiences. It was almost like the stoicism around pain was like a badge of honor. Like it was admirable. And I internalized that. And so, it was almost like, you bear the pain in silence, and somehow that makes you an admirable, strong, resilient human being. When in reality, when you really think about that, that's not true. You can't wish the engine light to go off in your car, or your car's not going to be more durable or, go further because it's going to endure the check engine light and endure whatever problem is in the engine. And we're not any different. It's, we need to pay attention to these signals, because this is one of the ways in which our body and our being is taking care of us. And so it is important to pay attention to those things.
And wonder if you could say a little bit more about pain being the way that your body is taking care of you. Because I think for me, when I'm experiencing pain, so often I feel like I'm being sabotaged by my body, or I feel like I need to overcome my body, or I feel really trapped in my body in those moments. And so I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about how pain might be a way that your body's trying to help you.
At the end of the day, our body's going to win. And I'm sure you're going to understand this. I mean, I understand this. I've shared with listeners before, and anybody who follows my story, I literally spent at least 2 decades, surgery after surgery, because I ignored my body. I didn't pay attention to the signals, and I approached it. I approached pain as an inconvenience. Like somehow it was getting in the way of my living. And, that's my mind. My mind is making up a story about that. Like, okay, this is really a big pain in the ass, no pun intended here. That, this is getting in the way of living. This is getting in the way of the things that I want to do. And so when I would tell myself that story, then of course what I would do was I would just push it away because it was inconvenient. We are in a culture in general, in American culture, we have been conditioned, programmed, taught on so many levels to be against our bodies. whether it's we don't like the way they look, whether it's we're taught to hustle and not pay attention to the things that it needs, like rest and sleep and food. We have, it has been revered and admired that our minds can be strong and just push through. But at the end of the day, our mind isn't going to push through and win. Our bodies are. Our bodies are going to lay us out. Like I said, I can't tell you how often I was in bed recovering from a surgery after a surgery. My body won because my body needed me to pay attention to what it needed for me to be okay. What separates us from all other animals is our mind, right? Our ability to logic and reason and have self-awareness and consciousness on a level that no other animal has. And it's an amazing thing. And at the same time, it probably gets us into the most trouble because our mind gets a little power hungry and decides what its agenda is, and it's going to try to rule the roost. When in reality, our bodies, and that is part of our humanness, is part of this partnership. We can't do anything without our bodies. We can think a lot of things, but nothing's going to happen. We're not going to manifest anything. We're not going to create anything. We're not going to build anything without the actual body. And so it's important that we're in partnership with it. So you need to take care of your body in order to do the things that you want to do in your life.
Was there a moment that you feel like this switched for you in the way that you were thinking about or the way that you were experiencing, maybe not just thinking, but experiencing pain, sensations, your body, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. I would say there was definitely a pivotal moment in my life, and I would say it was roughly around, I mean, it's been a little over 10 years. I'd say it's about 2013. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was in horrific pain. And when I say I was in horrific pain, I could barely walk. I would get this shooting electrical, like I was being electrocuted. And it was almost like it was so bad that I had to surrender to it. And the pain I couldn't ignore anymore. I mean, I couldn't breathe. I was in so much pain. And when that happened, I remember, I remember saying to myself, okay, I can't keep doing this. This isn't working. I need to do something different. And at that point, it was almost like a surrender. Like, okay, what is it that I need to get from this? Because what I'm doing with it isn't working any longer. And
Mm.
so at that point, I really turned inward and really started paying attention to, well, what is it communicating to me? And it was things like, you need to stop working so hard. You need to stop pushing your body, beyond its limits. You need to take care of it. You need to have rest, those kinds of things. And so this is the reason I say that pain is a way to take care of ourselves. And I know it doesn't sound like that. It doesn't feel like that, but that's exactly its purpose, is for it to take care of us. And we need to pay attention to that. And so that's when things really changed for me, is when I realized what I was doing, which was pushing through. I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't.
It's interesting that you talk about all this just because, growing up, I witnessed a lot of this pain that you experienced. I feel like this was a large part of my childhood and young adulthood, was like watching you in pain and like this very physical pain, and just like how time consuming it was, just like how debilitating it could be, how expensive it could be to be in such pain, and all these, procedures that you were accumulating. I think that a lot of people can probably really resonate with that. I'm sure, I'm thinking even just about our family, and like maybe your father, I'm sure, had maybe
Hmm.
similar experiences. I know he also had chronic pain, and he worked a lot. And, a lot of immigrant or first generation households are doing the same thing. Was there like a level of fear with that discovery? Did you feel like you were empowered to act on that?
Bottom line is, Esteban, I think life is just messy. It's complex, it's messy, it's not simple. We'd love it to be simple. We'd love it to be easy and very clear and straightforward. It's not. It also made me confront my own stories, if that makes sense. Like, I had narratives that I needed to work that hard. I was operating on narratives about fear and scarcity and being afraid I wasn't going to make it. So here I am. I've got this conflict. I got these narratives that are saying, you got to hustle, you got to go, you got to go, you got to go, you got to go. And my body's going, oh, no, you can't. And so it was a moment. It was literally a moment on moment on moment where I was constantly confronting this clash. And the clash was what's up here and what's real. I mean, what's real is I can't do it. I can't make enough money to pay all these bills. I can't make my body do the thing that I think it should be doing. It wasn't just, oh, I need to rest. It wasn't that simple, although that was part of it. It was also, I need to confront the things that I'm telling myself, because what I'm telling myself is actually resulting in what I am in right now, which is constant pain, financially strapped because I'm paying for all of these procedures to help manage the pain and all the damage that I'd actually done to my body. So it wasn't like a moment of truth and things pivoted. It was this constant opportunity of recognizing this clash between what I believed in order to survive and the fact that I couldn't sustain it.
What I'm hearing is this the pain was a way to bring you to this dynamic or conflict that was existing regardless of whether you saw it or not, but was there was this story that you were experiencing in your head around the need to work really hard, or the need to perform, or the scarcity of the world that you were trying to fight against. And then also just the reality on the other side of that, that your body can only do so much, you can only handle so much, your systems are on overload, all those things there. And pain was the way to show you that conflict was taking place.
Exactly. And so what it did, and this is the gift, I'm always joking about the terrible gifts, right? The terrible part of this was I wouldn't wish this kind of pain on anybody. It was horrific. Okay. The gift in it was that it taught me to go inward and to really pay attention to what was going on, like to pay attention to myself, like to instead of working against myself, to lean in and listen and hear what was happening. And so the gift that came out of this was a self-awareness, being able to turn inward and to really pay attention. What's happening for me? What is this experience? What's going on for me? A lot of times I would say things to myself like, okay, if pain were a person and could talk, what would it tell me? And that's when things really changed for me, because not only did it create self-awareness, but it also helped me cultivate compassion. Because instead of being my own worst enemy and beating myself up and, beating myself into submission, I started turning toward as if it were my best friend and asking, what do you want to tell me? And having compassion for that, which really changed my relationship with myself, as well as my relationship to the pain. Let's be real. It's uncomfortable. There's discomfort. I don't want to feel this, and we're pushing and pushing and pushing. And instead, feel it. Just feel it.